Greetings all, I'm Aaron Mills, and welcome back to Legacy of the Pink Panther, a 12-part retrospective on the films and cartoons of the Pink Panther franchise. Last time we looked at what many thought would be the final film in the original Pink Panther series, Curse of the Pink Panther. And the title would prove to be prophetic as MGM and Blake Edwards sued and countersued each other over production of the film. Ultimately, these lawsuits were settled in 1988, which is actually when Edwards got one last idea of how to keep the film series going. As if Inspector Clouseau didn't hammer that point home well enough, it was now abundantly clear that audiences wouldn't accept anyone else in the role of Clouseau, nor would they be willing to watch a brand new Clouseau-like character with no connection to Clouseau at all. However, Edwards had an idea. If audiences wouldn't accept an unrelated character with the same foibles as Clouseau, would they accept one who actually was related to everyone's favorite incompetent inspector? Edwards intended to find out and decided to make a movie featuring the son of Clouseau. Knowing that he'd need someone to play the lead in order to secure financing, Edwards got to work. He initially approached Kevin Kline, convinced the actor could be the next Clouseau after seeing him in French Kiss. Kline was a fan of Edwards and the film series, but ultimately decided the project wouldn't work after reading the script, and he declined. British comedian Rowan Atkinson was also approached for the role, and in fact had been on the short list to star in Curse of the Pink Panther, but he also turned the project down, believing there was no way the series could work without Peter Sellers. Gerard Depardieu was approached next, but this was hampered by a sudden shift in power at MGM. Giancarlo Peretti came in as the studio head and backed out of the project entirely. Edwards sued MGM once again for not allowing him to arrange outside financing for the film. Eventually, Alan Ladd Jr. succeeded Peretti and settled the suit out of court. Unfortunately, by the time this happened, Depardieu was committed to starring in 1492 Conquest of Paradise. Additionally, Depardieu made controversy over some remarks about rape he made to an American journalist, making MGM reconsider whether they really wanted him to be the lead in a family-friendly film series. After seeing the films Down by Law and Johnny Stecchino, Edwards decided on Italian comedian Roberto Benigni for the role. While Benigni read the script and considered, MGM had Tim Curry on standby to take the role if Benigni turned it down. Allegedly, there was even a mock-up of a poster featuring a cartoon version of Curry made, but I haven't been able to confirm whether or not this actually exists. Ultimately, Benigni accepted, and that allowed Edwards to secure additional financing from Aurelio De Laurentiis, nephew of noted film producer Dino De Laurentiis. With funding from Laurentiis and MGM, production began in 1992, and the film was completed 14 months later. So what was the end result? Did audiences like the continuation of the Clouseau lineage? Or did they just kind of pass it over? Well, let's find out as we look at Son of the Pink Panther. In this case, unlike most of the films in the series, we start off with the obligatory animated opening credits, but this time, inspired heavily by the success of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, we see the Panther interacting with live-action footage with assorted antics happening to a new a cappella arrangement of the series theme by Bobby McFerrin. But more on this in a later episode. The film proper opens with a gang of goons plotting to kidnap Yasmine, Princess of Lugash. What? You thought that just because the Pink Panther diamond is gone for good, that we were actually finished with Lugash? The goons are led by Hans Zarba, played by obligatory 90s bad guy specialist Robert Davi. Although, to be honest, I had to look this up because none of these characters were referred to by name in the entire movie. Zarba expects his team to work together and isn't happy when there's dissension in the ranks.
Better. She was only showing how good she is.
Yeah, I'm sure you've noticed by now that this movie opens up a little darker than some of the others in the series, and that's saying something considering both A Shot in the Dark and Curse of the Pink Panther opened with a murder. But bear in mind that the first Gulf War had ended about a year before this movie went into production, so it could just be residual feelings of the time influencing the plot somehow. Anyway, next we see Yasmine with her father, King Yusef of Lugash, traveling in their car, where we see all isn't quite well in their household.
Your mother never smoked.
Well, I'm surprised you noticed. She wasn't dead 3 weeks before you married that woman.
Well, you will no doubt be pleased to know that I am about to pay the price for that folly.
Then the rumor's true?
Yes, it would seem so. But Yasmine, please, keep it to yourself. I don't want to alert your stepmother until I have proof.
At the casino, Yasmine encounters Zarba, mistaking him for one of her bodyguards and slapping him when she believes he's mouthing off to her. This ultimately goes nowhere because we suddenly cut to a few days later where the crew raids the yacht and abducts Yasmine.
The safety of your daughter depends on two things. First, $100 million discreetly deposited into a Swiss account.
No problem.
Second, to abdicate.
Renounce the throne. That is impossible.
Then Yasmine will die.
Who is to succeed me?
All in good time.
And finally, after all this intrigue, we meet our title character, Gendarme Second Class Jacques Gumbrelli. We meet Jacques as he patrols on his moped and is quickly overtaken by a speeding car. Jacques immediately gives chase, but guess who just happens to be in the car?
Hey! We haven't time to humor some bumpkin cop. Lose him.
Yes, fate is once again conspiring against the now Commissioner Charles Dreyfus. In more ways than one, it seems. While trying to lose Jacques, Dreyfus and Francois get into a fender bender with a van, which just so happens to be Zarba and his crew's getaway vehicle. Dreyfus demands to see Zarba's license, which prompts the crew to get ready to kill him, but Jacques arrives in time to distract everybody.
Ha! That felt good.
10 years later, and the twitch returns. Poor Dreyfus. And that sinking feeling in his stomach doesn't go away either as he watches as Jacques tries to figure out what's going on.
When I asked you if anyone was hurt, you replied, yes, in my van.
No, I said yes in the van, not in my van.
No, you did not say yes in the van, not yes in the van. You said yes. You did not say yes my van, not yes the van.
Look,
you said yes my van, not yes in the van.
Did you hear what I just said?
Yes, I heard.
It's my van.
Oh, now we're getting someplace.
Zarba passes the drugged Yasmine off as his injured sister, and Jacques more or less falls in love at first sight and introduces himself.
Who are you? I am Gendarme Jacques Gumbrelli.
Have you been paying attention to the earlier films in this series? Jacques instructs Zarba to take Yasmine to the hospital, but gets caught in the cargo doors and is more or less dragged off with the van. He gets loose and tries to get a ride with Dreyfus, who also takes off without him. As it turns out, Dreyfus has been asked by the President of France to investigate the kidnapping, effectively making him pull rank on the local chief of police. But it seems the chief has a small bit of passive-aggressive revenge in store.
I want your best man as liaison. That would be Gumbrelli.
Yasmine's taken to the gang's hideout, and Zarba sends one of his men to take out Jacques, expecting him to arrive at the hospital. However, Dreyfus, his suspicions aroused, is also waiting at the hospital, also certain Jacques will arrive. Which, of course, he does.
It won't be long.
Why not?
Because there was something phony about Mr. Jones and those hunters with their automatic weapon. I think Mr. Jones just wanted to get out of there. I don't believe he had any intention of taking his sister to the hospital.
And here we get another reminder that Dreyfus is in fact a very good investigator, and most likely rose to the rank of commissioner on his own merits once Clouseau was out of his life. Zarba's goon shows up, and as Jacques leaves the hospital, both the goon and Dreyfus follow him. The goon tries to run Jacques down, but Dreyfus realizes what's going on and intervenes. A chase then breaks out. Jacques' bike gets caught in some tram tracks, he loses his handlebars and nearly gets run down by a tram before his bike heads off on another rail. The goon and Dreyfus aren't so lucky, winding up crashing into the tram. Meanwhile, Jacques' brakes give out and he heads off the dock. Dreyfus arrives and leaps in to save him from drowning. Yeah, I can't believe it either.
Help! What's wrong?
I can't swim.
Neither can I.
Then why aren't you drowning?
Because it's easier to stand.
What?
Yes.
You know, it's just so wonderfully lucky that Dreyfus decided to put a wetsuit on under his clothes that day. Dreyfus decides to give Jacques a lift home and informs him of the goon trying to kill him. Since Jacques actually got a look at Yasmine and they didn't, it would seem Dreyfus is bringing Jacques in on the case. The goon follows them back to Jacques' home.
Do you live here alone, Gambrelli?
Oh, no. I live with my mother.
I'd like to meet your mother.
Why not? Everybody wants to meet my mother. Oh, excuse me, ma'am. Oh, this is Police Commissioner Dreyfus. He wants to meet you.
How do you do, Mrs. Gambrelli? I hope it's not too late.
No. Please, come in, Commissioner.
Yes, this is Maria Gambrelli, but no, she is not played by Elke Summer. In this case, she is played by another Pink Panther alumni, Claudia Cardinal, who you may recall was Princess Dala in the original 1963 Pink Panther. Kind of appropriate she's here now, isn't it? While Jacques changes clothes and Dreyfus tries to find out more about him from Maria, the goon sets a bomb outside in the garden. And then Dreyfus gets confirmation of his suspicions.
So I decided you would be better off if you never knew.
You mean his father is...
Clouseau!
Commissioner.
And here we go again. Yasmine makes an escape attempt but is foiled, managing to injure Zarba in the process. Yusa, the female member of the gang, decides to get him a doctor. Meanwhile, Jacques and Maria visit Dreyfus in the hospital.
Jacques!
I report this to Mr. What are you doing?
You know, I'm not all that certain this movie should be reminding the audience that there are comedies out there better than this one. Dreyfus gets Jacques to confirm that Yasmine is the woman he saw in the van, and the chief arrives just in time for Dreyfus to turn his revenge around on him.
And I'm particularly happy that you are still with us, Commissioner.
Oh, I'm sure you are. And I'm particularly happy that you assigned me Officer Gambrelli.
Really?
Without him, I might not have discovered that the princess was being held here in the south of France.
As they leave the hospital, Jacques spots Yusa and another member of the gang coming in. Making an excuse, he goes back into the hospital and, overhearing Yusa, disguises himself as a doctor, which of course prompts Yusa to grab him and haul him off to see Zarba. Back in Lugash, we discover that the king is well aware that the queen is having an affair with one of his generals. What he's not aware of is that the two of them are the ones behind Yasmine's kidnapping. Have I mentioned that the editing is very, very weird in this movie? Sequences and scenes just seem to be cut off right in the middle with no real resolution to anything, and the result is just a very choppy and uneven movie. And this really seems to be killing a lot of the humor that's supposed to be here. Not only that, from a story perspective, how the hell many times is the royal family deposed and reinstated in Lugash? I mean, this is what, the 6th time this has happened in this series? Anyway, Jacques is taken to see Zarba, but in his nervousness accidentally drinks the rubbing alcohol, which hits him like a Mack truck. And things are complicated when he jabs himself in the face with a needle full of Novocaine, ultimately resulting in him passing out. While Zarba makes plans to relocate from France to Darfur to see someone called Uncle Idris, Jacques comes to in the same room as Yasmine. Yasmine is also doped up to the gills, leading to a bunch of nonsense romance which isn't very funny. Meanwhile, we discover that the Queen and the General are behind the kidnapping and that the King has them under surveillance. Later, the gang dopes up Yasmine and Jacques. Yasmine and the gang fly off in a helicopter, while Jacques is left with a very large bomb in the van. And the audience is left with a very large bomb on the screen. Fortunately for Jacques, though, the van hits a rock on its way down the road, throwing him out of the van just before the bomb explodes. Jacques winds up back in the hospital. Maria comes to see him, and Jacques tells her about Uncle Idris. Maria relates the information back to Dreyfus and expresses her concerns.
He's too much like his father. That's why a disappeared came here and encouraged him to be a musician or a poet. But in spite of everything, he was determined to be a policeman. Can you protect him, Charles? Soon I must tell him who his father was.
His father, yes, was an idiot. I mean...
Yes, but I can't tell him that.
I know, but I still don't understand. You, such a beautiful woman.
We were caught in a snowstorm. I knew we would freeze to death unless we kept moving. He said the Alaskan Indians kept from freezing to death by making love. I was young. I wanted to live. I hope you're not offended.
No. It's just too bad you didn't have a stationary bicycle or a rowing machine or something.
Yes, this is a completely different story than what we saw in A Shot in the Dark. And it's also an example of the loose continuity that these movies have. Otherwise, we can be pretty sure that if it was a little bit tighter, Dreyfus would have recognized Maria Gambrelli in the first place. However, we've also seen Dreyfus inexplicably return from being disintegrated from one movie to the next with no explanation, so much like that element, we're just going to have to roll with this. Dreyfus swallows his own concerns and encourages Maria to tell Jacques about his father. She does so, and shortly afterward, Dreyfus puts Jacques fully on the case as he's the only one who can identify the kidnappers. And Jacques is given a field promotion and a name change.
Francois, see to it. The gendarme second class Jacques Umbrelli is promoted to detective first class Jacques Clouseau Jr. as quickly as you can.
Jacques Clouseau Jr. Because trying to link your new character to your old character using this particular naming convention has never gone wrong before. Bond. James Bond Jr. And so, with Jacques having embraced his heritage, he's off to visit Professor August Balls, once again with Graham Stark reprising the role.
How can I help you? Son, nearest, dearest, and dearest cousin.
I must get into Lugash without being recognized.
Say no more.
Master!
Master, bring me the plans of the inconspicuous Bedouin beggar, number 2.
Make note of this. We're going to come back to it in a minute. Jacques then goes to a park in the middle of the night, apparently summoned by a message that we can only assume ended up on the cutting room floor. It's here that he meets another old friend of his father's.
So I'm available, in case you are considering hiring me in the same capacity that I once served your father. Ah, have a fortune cookie.
No.
What does it say?
You will hire an Oriental family friend. Amazing.
And so, with that awkward cut, Jacques and Cato head for Lugash. However, somebody has leaked the truth about Jacques' parentage to the media, which means that now there's a very big target on his head. The Queen and the General are naturally nervous, but the King sees it as an opportunity.
You have always known that if we were discovered, we risk reprisal from our unstable neighbor. It may well be that the son of France's greatest detective can insure us against that discovery.
How can he do that?
By eliminating Uncle Idris, or at least taking credit for it. For the time being, at least, make sure that Detective Clouseau Jr. is well protected.
After this, Zarba and his crew arrive in Darfur with Yasmine. And Jacques gets a call from Mr. Wazim, his contact, who tells him to meet him at a bar called Omar's Oasis later that night, and that he'll be wearing a red carnation as an identifier. Now, you recall back in Revenge of the Pink Panther how Professor Balls provided Clouseau and company with some, shall we say, ethnically insensitive disguises? Let's see if he's mellowed with age.
Mr. Gambrelli's room. It's Commissioner Dreyfus.
Coming.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Dreyfus orders Jacques back to Nice, claiming that France can't protect him anymore. Jacques, of course, refuses to return home and heads for Omar's oasis. He collides with a belly dancer who recognizes him and asks for his autograph. And the movie decides to play into even more racist stereotypes.
Oh, quickly! I must finish dancing. Oh my, he cut off my nipples.
Female mutilation. Comedy. Omar moves in, but Jacques is saved by a man with a red carnation. He is not Mr. Wazim, who had been killed while he was on the phone with Jacques. The man attempts to assassinate Jacques, but the Clouseau propensity for dumb luck saves him. More assassins come out of the woodwork, but the king's agent, Colonel Abdouré, saves him. The colonel tells Jacques where the princess is, but Jacques, not knowing who to trust, rushes off on his own, ditching Cato on one side of the road in the process. The colonel and Omar pick up Cato and honestly, I've just stopped caring. I mean, seriously, the pacing of this movie is horrible. The comedy's not working, and the action sequences are dragging like hell. So forget it, let's just wrap this up. Jacques arrives at the fortress of Uncle Idris, backed up by the Lugash military. Idris uses the chaos to make a break for it, dragging Yasmine with him. Zarba sends Yusa after her, and Yusa kills Idris. Yasmine and Yusa face off in a martial arts battle, which is about as boring as everything else in this sequence. Jacques arrives, interrupts the fight, and... oh, forget it. Jacques distracts Yusa long enough for Yasmine to knock her out, then Zarba shows up and takes her hostage, again. Jacques starts reciting poetry to Yasmine, to which Zarba responds by shooting him. Fortunately, Cato happens to be on the scene and knocks Zarba out. And yeah, pretty much that wraps everything the hell up, with the exception of tying up one subplot, which you may have noticed if you've been paying attention. Because, quite obviously, Dreyfus and Maria have been falling in love throughout the entire movie, and this culminates in the way these things usually do, and gives an opportunity to give Dreyfus one last little surprise before the credits roll.
Mon Dieu, forgive me.
Jacqueline!
I'm sorry I'm late, Mama.
Jacqueline!
Jacques! Brother!
Sister!
Mama?
Charles, your head is bleeding.
Yes, you have received the BIM.
How was the
Bim? Maria?
Oh, Charles, I planned to tell you. I had twins.
And yeah, aside from a pointless scene at the end where Jacques is honored by the government of Lugash for rescuing Yasmine, we come to the end of Son of the Pink Panther and the end of the original film series. And this was not a good one to go out on. I saw this film in the theaters when I was a kid and I enjoyed it then, but now, 23 years later, it's not hard to see why it didn't do well. The editing is strange, the story is really too dark for a Pink Panther movie, and the pacing is horrible. The movie plays into a ton of Middle Eastern stereotypes that are just cringeworthy these days, and worst of all, most of the jokes just fall flat. Roberto Benigni is fine as Jacques, but if you're familiar with his other movies, it just seems like more of the same. The slapstick looks and feels sloppy, and you never really feel like Jacques truly succeeds at anything on his own merits, because he has almost everybody, including Dreyfus, committed to his success. And this is painfully evident during the climax, which really seems out of place compared to everything else in this film. Herbert Lom and Claudia Cardinal are the real bright spots in this movie, with the romance actually feeling natural and not shoehorned in. Even Dreyfus seems more likable here because it's quite clear he's making an effort to not let his experiences with Clouseau taint his opinion of Jacques. But overall, yeah, this is not the way they should have gone to continue this series. You know, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think I've actually stumbled upon the solution that was staring everybody in the face on how to continue this series without Peter Sellers. What they should have done was, rather than create a new Clouseau-like character, they should have simply shifted the focus of the movies from Clouseau to Dreyfus. Herbert Lom has been in just about as many films in this series as Peter Sellers has. And since we know that Dreyfus is not an incompetent investigator, but is prone to horrendously bad luck, and has suffered just as many ridiculous things as Clouseau has, well, this could have made a brand new, interesting dynamic to keep these movies going forward. Unfortunately, this is the movie we got instead, and audiences didn't like it. Audiences hated this film, critics hated this film, to the point that it currently has a 6% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And pretty much, not only was this the last film in the original Pink Panther series, it was Blake Edwards' last film, period. He retired right after this movie came out, and Henry Mancini died a year later. And it was pretty much the end of an era. But not for long. In 1996, MGM began making overtures to both Robin Williams and Jim Carrey about the possibility of starring in a new Pink Panther film. In 1997, they took another step forward by cutting a deal with Blake Edwards, which would allow them to proceed with making such a movie without Edwards actually being involved. But it would be another 9 years before anybody saw anything on the silver screen. But we're going to talk about that next time, when Steve Martin steps into the role of Inspector Clouseau in the 2006 reboot of The Pink Panther. I'm Aaron Mills. Join me again next time as we continue our look at the legacy of the Pink Panther.